This is Photographing the West podcast, the podcast for people who love to explore the western highways and byways while photographing the landscape and wildlife. And now here's your host, Kirby Flanagan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 52 of Photographing the West. Twice a month, we bring you interviews with interesting people doing interesting things. Today, I have with me again Western portrait photographer Bob Osborn. Welcome back to Photographing the West, Bob.
Thanks, Kirby. Good to be here.
So to start off, we're going to talk about creativity as it relates to your photography, which is portrait photography. So how would you define creativity in terms of portrait photography?
How do you make your pictures better? How do you make a leap in creativity? So now to go back through that, I guess I would define it as better, a higher level of creativity would be better pictures.
Okay. So is that something we're born with, or can it be learned?
Yes, I would say absolutely it has to be learned, but the learning, the process, let's go back and establish a point so we can talk about this in a person's let's call it development. Let's establish a point. Let's say that person is 35, 40 years old, loves photography, and wants to be better. Okay, 35 years old, they've learned a fair amount. Have they learned how to increase their creativity? My best answer to that is you will maybe luck into it. I think my best answer would be that the more you understand about creativity, I'm talking about learning here, the more you understand about creativity, the better equipped you are to raise your level of creativity.
There's all kinds of resources out there for photography these days, but very few of them relate directly to creativity. What sources did you learn or did you use to become more creative?
Is that by looking back and observing what I consider to be major things in my life, major leaps in creativity. I paid attention to them. I've dissected them. I have quantified them to a degree, and I now understand them. Way up front, let's take that same person, I think was 35 years old. Let's say they're 25 years old. Probably mostly what they know is just what other people have told them, if they have retained that. And I have found, one of the things that I have found is that most people, when they say they're teaching you, most people avoid the central main theme that makes them really good at what they do. There is usually a central, simple, main thing that they have discovered, and they're very reluctant to turn that over to somebody else. So anyway, learned, yes, learned. I have learned that by observing, it goes beyond that. I've observed, I love art, so I have to include a bunch of people in this. I have paid in the past close attention to all kinds of artists. Let me just throw a few at you. Photographic artists. Avedon, who won't tell you a thing. He won't tell you any of his secrets. Annie Leibovitz, she will tell you exactly thought processes that go through her head, how she accomplished something. Other people that you don't get a chance to talk to, August Sander, Picasso, Jackson Pollock. I think maybe somewhere in this conversation we'll get to Jackson Pollock. I've learned from them. I think it was Picasso a long time ago that said, bad artists copy, good artists steal. And so now everybody listening is going, oh, that means plagiarism. That means copying. That means just stealing somebody's ideas. No, not what he meant. What he meant was, when you find a person who is doing something that you really find amazing, you study that person, you track down interviews with them, you look at their photography, you research it, you study that person, and you learn everything you can about that person. And then now you have learned something, whatever it is, but now that something that you learn gets translated through your mind, your experiences, your proclivities into your own, in this case, photography. And generally speaking, by the time you're done and you have learned something from that person and then produced a piece of art, an objective person walking up and looking at that art will have no idea. You know where it came from. You can track each step. But a person viewing that art, generally speaking, will have no idea where it came from because it's not the same, unless you just plain old copied. You went to where Ansel Adams, you researched Ansel Adams' Moonrise over Hernandez. You found out the exact day of the year, the exact time, the exact place where he put his tripod, the exact exposure, the exact camera. It was an 8x10 Deerdorf, I think. And you take that exact same picture. That's copying. On the other hand, in order to do that, you're going to kind of inadvertently, even if you just want to copy, you're kind of inadvertently going to learn a lot about Ansel Adams' thought systems. By the way, that picture was an accident. In other words, I would throw that out as so much for conscious, determined, taking thought and raising your level of creativity. That picture, most people will agree, is Ansel's most iconic photographs. And there's some photographers listening to this. You guys should know this. You guys should be going, oh, here we go. I'm going to hear that story again. Jiminy Christmas. I've heard it 50 times. Okay, you are. Or maybe you haven't heard it. Ansel is driving along somewhere in New Mexico, clearly in the area of Hernandez. And he's driving along, it's getting about sunset, and bam, he looks out, and there is that scene. It was an accident, complete accident, except that Ansel had been preparing for that accident for something like, how long, 40 years of photography. And so, man, he got out, got his camera set up. I'm pretty sure he not guessed, because he understood the luminance of the moon or something like that, set his exposure, knew what it would be, clicked the picture, and the picture was gone. One exposure. So anyway, accident, except that he prepared for that accident for something like 40 years. He knew exactly how to handle it, recognized it. So anyway, Moonrise over Hernandez.
It's fair to say, too, that Ansel did a lot of post-processing on that picture. So.
Oh, lots. Years and years of. There's another learning process. Oh, that was a good one, Kirby. Let me respond to that. You just threw in a fact that is going to, in some way, tend to prove or back up what I will be saying when we get to how I believe creativity happens. Here's what Ansel did. I already told you how he took the picture. in processing, Ansel being one of the great, marvelous, amazing people in a darkroom, in addition to taking pictures, in a darkroom, he is a master. But his first few prints of that are not, if you look at the first few prints of that, they're pretty weak. It took him years of printing, reprinting, trying to improve it. This is right brain. This is right brain thinking, which usually is kind of subtle. It occurs over a period of time. It doesn't clonk you on the head with some immediate, amazing revelation. Anyway, over the years and years of printing that picture, gradually he made it contrastier, darker. The sky got darker and darker and darker and darker. It evolved into the picture you see today, where the sky is essentially black or very, very close to it. So yeah, good point, Kirby. And that did not happen immediately. Ansel talked a lot about visualization. His initial visualization was not the picture you see today, not the iconic, amazing, strong, powerful image you see today. It was originally, I'm not going to. Ansel would turn over in his grave if I said wimpy, but it was his first prints of that were much weaker than his final prints. Good point.
I think that's true of a lot of his work. I went to a show of his work many years ago now, and was surprised how different his early work was from his later work. And his iconic work has a lot more contrast to it than his earlier work. So yeah, he learned along the way too, just like all of us have to.
Yes, which is one reason back a few points ago, I was trying to establish a person. I think I came up with a 35-year-old photographer, just in order to kind of quantify what we're talking about. I agree with you completely. In other words, part of this creative process is an evolution. And boy, I don't, this, if this somebody listening to this, if this discourages you, quit being a photographer, go do something else. It takes a long time. It takes a long time to become a great artist. You
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it, man. It takes a long time. If you're not willing to do that, you're not. Get out of here. You're not an artist. You're not a true one. You don't really love it. You just, I don't know. Everything that I'm talking about has so little to do with money, and it has everything to do with love. And if you're doing this for money and you're going just, oh, what's the picture that's going to sell the most? You go out, take that picture and put it in your gallery or a gallery or something like that. You photograph just to make money. Cool. Okay. I hope you make a lot of money. I hope you do. But in my opinion, as I define a real artist, I would make a comparison to maybe Van Gogh, who in his entire life only sold one painting. On the other hand, Van Gogh changed the world.
Right.
One of these things about the evolution of a person's photography, in other words, raising the level of creativity and the time it takes. There's a couple things that I don't want to forget to stick in here, so I'm going to stick them in now. One is look at a lot of photographs. Look at the best photographs you can look at. The internet is a wonderful place to do that. Galleries are a good place to do that. Anywhere you can do it. Look at a lot of photographs. And there's one other point I may forget to make in here. Somebody said, I wish it was me, but it wasn't. But I don't remember who it was. And that is, everything you need to know about your next photograph is in your last photograph. And so my point there is do a lot of looking at your own photographs and pay attention to it. Try to figure out why you're doing what you're doing and how to improve it. And what did you do maybe accidentally that improved something, that gave you a new idea? Anyway, look at a lot of photographs, and that includes your own photographs.
And sort of identify what you did right, what you did wrong, and how you could improve them.
Here, I have can I give you an example of that?
Sure.
Okay, cowboy photography. I photographed cowboys for, I don't know, 8-9 years. And my first cowboy photograph, I would call it environmental. I would go out to a ranch, I would look for a background, I would look for good lighting. I would talk to whoever I was photographing about what they're wearing, what they wear when they work. I would like to get a really good idea of who that person is as much as I could, and then proceed with the photograph. So I would end up with pictures of some gnarly old cowboy leaning on a corral fence with a lariat hanging there and some spurs and stuff like that. So one day a lady came into my gallery and she said, and she wanted me to photograph her husband, who is an old-time cowboy. So I asked her about her husband. And to make this brief, what she told me is, oh yeah, he's a gnarly old cowboy, but he's having some health issues. He's actually been indoors in our house, sitting at the kitchen table smoking for 4 years. Hasn't been outside. So anyway, what's his name? Wood, Dan Wood. Dan's probably 65, sits at the table smoking, and his wife wanted me to take his picture. And I'm thinking, man, 65, leathery. She showed me a couple pictures of him, leathery, gnarly old cowboy. I want to do it. And so now, one other thing she told me, he's kind of grouchy. Let me rephrase that from my point of view. He is a grouchy son of a gun. So anyway, I'm approaching this thinking, I'm not going to get very many pictures. It's going to be inside their house. Their house may be some really cool old rustic cabin with a great big north light window that gives me just the right light, or not. It might be a generic house that contributes nothing to the picture and has a lousy background. And so what do I do? Well, I had a big piece of black velvet that I'd been thinking of using for a background. I had one of those flashes that you put on top of your camera. It was a Nikon flash, which I can't remember the name of. And I had a little tripod I could put that on, and I had a softbox because I was thinking of maybe using that for fill. Actually, I had used it a couple times for fill on some of the cowboy pictures. So I loaded all this stuff and a sheet of foam core just in case I needed to bounce to fill from the flash. And I went out there, and yeah, sure enough, the house is generic as heck. Actually, there's a window right behind him, and he ain't gonna move. And is he grouchy? Yeah, boy, he is really grouchy. But his wife got his daughter over there, and so his daughter and his wife are backing me up and trying to keep him in line while I get a picture of him. And so I wanted a picture of him smoking. Actually, you know what I wanted to do was I wanted to try to get a picture of an old cowboy, long-time cowboy who was slowly dying and spent a lot of time thinking about when he used to be this tough dude that ran a ranch and herded cows and did all that cowboy stuff. And so that was in my mind, and luckily I brought that flash. So I set that little flash up in the softbox, and I put a sheet of foam core right behind him, and he's sitting at the table, and he ain't moving. So behind him, I kind of get in this black. You see, I'm establishing a studio here. I'm building it around him. Black velvet backdrop right behind him. A piece of foam core on his right side. A small camera flash, which I had a cord hooked to my camera to fire it. I'm not using all that technical crap that's inside a camera that will tell your flash what to do. I'm doing the 30-second, put a cord to the flash, and I want to control the flash. I don't want the camera to do it. So I set it up there. I think I got 15 exposures. The first 5 were just getting exposure and fill and everything kind of right. And I got about 10 more before I said, okay, that's it. And you know what? Here's what I found. Now, understand, I got pushed into a situation I really didn't want to do, but I had to. It's am I going to get the picture or not? And so I got pushed into this flash, fill, black background thing. And at the time, it was I thought, and a fair amount of other people thought too, that was the best cowboy picture I had taken so far. And understand that I did not do that through intelligence or anything else. I did it because there wasn't any other way to get the picture. And of course, I did it the best that I could, with fill and backdrop and the whole business like that. But it was this situation that presented itself to me that I was going to get a picture that maybe was good, maybe not, maybe was good or not. And so here's my point. A lot of time, actually, I'm responding to what you said. A lot of times situations come along where the situation teaches you something. This is part of the evolution. It's why look at your own photographs, look at other people's photographs, have a lot of photographs in your head and study them and try to understand how the person did it and have all that stuff in your head in case you get a person like Dan Wood, who was this gnarly, wrinkled old cowboy smoking a cigarette, nicotine stained fingernails, with this look in his eye, like he realizes this is slipping away. He realizes it. He realizes his time as a tough ass cowboy is coming to an end, and it's there. It's in the picture. Evolution, things that present themselves to you.
And you apparently learned a lot from that because you went on to use that technique in many of your later photographs of cowboys.
Let me rephrase what you just said. In all of the portraits I take now, I use some variation of what Dan Wood made me use. All of them, every one of them, every single one. Yes, I've refined it. Yes, I've changed the backdrop. Yes, but the basic setup I used in a lot of the later cowboy photography. I use it in all of the traditional Indian photographs that I take now, and all of the Indian street people photographs that I take now. Yes.
So you learned a lot from that experience.
I did, and I'll bet you $1 if Ansel Adams came across another scene similar to Moonrise over Hernandez and made an exposure or 2 or 5 or something like that, went back to his darkroom, I'll bet you $1 he would go right to those high contrast. What's that word? Chiaroscuro?
Chiaroscuro.
All it means is contrast.
Yeah.
I bet you $1 he would go right to those high contrast, strong, negative areas, strong negative areas. The negative areas in a photograph can be, done properly, can be so strong. I think painters call it massing, but it's massing areas of dark tonalities, and boy, do they contribute to a strong image.
Especially in black and white.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Maybe only in black. I'm not sure. I don't think in color, and I don't color. You may be maybe only in black and white. I'm not sure. Works in painting though. Dark tonalities. I don't know.
So lighting's obviously a big part of portrait photography, and I'm assuming you learned a lot about lighting from that particular experience.
I did. Tons. Just tons. Yes. If you're an art photographer, lighting is paramount, essential, a major factor, not the final determining factor, because there are a few other things that go in, especially portrait photography, but such an important factor. Very, very, very important factor. Yes.
What's your approach to lighting these days?
Dan Wood taught me a major lesson, and I haven't changed it. I haven't changed it yet. I've improved it. I've refined it. I understand it better, but I do the very same thing. So when let's take a street person, and we're talking about lighting, and one of the things that sooner or later I'm going to say about this is, my opinion, everything. Let's talk. I'm just going to talk about portraits. Everything in that portrait should contribute, should support the story that person is telling you with his or her eyes, his or her hand gestures. Eyes first, hand gestures second. Clothing should contribute, lighting should contribute. If it's possible to have a homeless style of lighting, do it. I try to do that. I try to make my prints have a despairing, homeless feel to them. Not boring. Don't go think boring. Those pictures are not boring. They'll make you cry. So lighting. Here's what I do. Go to a lighting seminar, and some old guy will come out and tell you, oh, you need a key light and a fill light and a background light and a hair light and 10 other lights, and you got to have them all balanced out. And you do not, unless you want to take predictable, normal studio pictures like everybody else in the world when they're using lighting. Here's what I do, and I would say to anybody listening to this, go look at my pictures, decide if you think they're good or not, and then you can decide if I'm full of beans or not. Here's what I do. I bring actually for fill, I like a 32 by 40 inch sheet of foam core. I think it's 3/16, let's see, I think it's a 1/4 inch thick foam core. And I have it on a little tripod that holds it in place. And if we're speaking of a subject in front of me, almost invariably I get that thing as close as I can to them, and I angle it according to where the flash is so that the rays of light coming out here are going to bounce back and fill the dark side of that person's face. Okay, so there's fill. Backdrop, I don't use black velvet anymore because I found too many situations where black hair or a black cowboy hat, say, or a black coat or something like that didn't separate from the background. In other words, let's take a black hat. You got a cowboy with a black hat on against a black background. And if you don't do something to cause that black hat to stand out from the black background, you're going to lose it. It's going to be a little disturbing a person's going to walk up and look at your picture, and they're going to go right to the hat that isn't there, and you lost them. So anyway, I now use a linen backdrop that I would say is probably about a zone 5, about that. And with that backdrop, and it's a pretty good size, it's probably 8 or 9 feet across and probably 8 or 9 feet high by the time I get it up on tripods and stuff. And if I move that backdrop closer to the person, or some of the my flash falls off onto it, I can lighten it up a little bit. If I want it darker for some reason, I can move it back away, so I can adjust the darkness or relative darkness of the backdrop. And then, so now I'm looking at my subject, and over on my left, their right, is the foam core fill. Over on my right, their left, is a flash. And I use a pretty powerful flash. I think it's 2400 watts. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. And I use that for a very good reason. And it's in a softbox. The softbox itself diffuses light. And it's not an awfully large softbox. It's only about maybe 1.5 feet across by 2.5 feet high. Might be a hair larger than that, not much. Let's do this real simple. I'll do it this is kind of how I think in my head. Kind of 3/4 forward, if that makes any sense. And maybe 3/4 up, except that 3/4 up I usually start coming down with, because usually I want to get a little bit of light under maybe a hood of a jacket. I'm talking street people now. They wear a lot of hoods, especially in winter. They wear a lot of clothes. And so maybe I want to create a shadow area under the hood where their eyes are, but the light from, let's say, down at their cheeks is kind of transitioning into shadow, so that they are looking out. You can see their eyes in the print, but their eyes are looking out of the shadows. That is a very touchy effect to achieve, but it works. It's a very homeless street person kind of appearance, in my opinion. So now, part of how I get that is how I bounce light back into their face. So anyway, there's my power. I will adjust the flash in strength up to where I get f/22 on my lens. The reason for that is I want the best depth of field I can get. I do not want the tip of their nose going out of focus. Absolutely, you want their eyes sharp in focus. I don't want, but additional to that, I don't want the tip of their nose to go soft on me. I don't mind so much if their ears go a little bit soft, because their ears will be graduating back into the dark, shadowy areas. But if they have their hands up in front of their face, I want their hands to be sharp also. So f/22. So my flash is adjusted up to where it gives me an f/22. And the fill and the flash are aimed, each of them in their own way, aimed in such a way that I get this light on their face, and I control, I'm real good at this, I can control that light going into the shadow areas just the way I want it. I already described that with their eyes to you. So there's my lighting setup.
So when you're doing a portrait, do you focus on the eyes?
Early on with cowboys, way into photographing cowboys, I was used to focus manually. I want to decide my own exposure. If you look at those, what are those hexagrams? Histograms. If you look at a histogram of my picture, and they put it up so that the doofus photographer that doesn't think about what's going on. If I'm insulting somebody out there, I'm doing it intentionally. If you look at a histogram and you do what they tell you should do, in other words, all those little peaks should be spread nicely across the range of the histogram, and there's a good exposure. If you believe that and try to achieve that, you will come out with photographs that are so predictable, everybody in the world takes them just that way. If you were to look at one of my histograms, over on the left side, the darks are going to be crammed into blocking up. And there's going to be these real high spikes going up and a lot of it. And then about 1/4 of the way, working your way right into the histogram, it's going to drop off to just kind of a line going across. That's your highlights. There are, according to the histogram, the way a histogram looks at my picture, there are almost no highlights in it at all. That's how I want it. The histogram doesn't think I know what I'm doing. I don't think the histogram knows what it's doing. So I consequently never look at a histogram. And what I come up with is some real, Kirby, you've looked at some of my pictures. They are strong, dramatic, powerful images. They communicate.
No question.
They speak for that person is standing there. If you're paying attention, if you're standing in front of one of my photographs and it's a good photograph, that person is speaking to you. That person is in your imagination, and your imagination is beginning to open up. But pay real close, learn what you're doing and learn how to make it work. And it doesn't have to be, eventually it will be very complex. Yes, there are so many subtleties, but initially it won't. A fill, a flash, a backdrop. Now, having said that, to get where I am right now, I've come a long way since Dan Wood. But Dan Wood is the guy that he gets the credit for making me do this. So that's that one.
So with your lighting, softbox and flash, do you use any kind of modifiers, or you just use them straight?
Like what kind of modifier?
Any, like a flag or any kind of thing to alter the pattern of the light or the location of the light?
No, like snoots or barn
Right.
doors or no.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is controlled by the size of the softbox. The larger the softbox, the more the light will tend to wrap around the person's, let's just do their head, and let's call it a globe. The larger the softbox, given the same distance from the globe or the person's head, the larger the softbox, the wider, the more it will tend to wrap around that globe. The smaller the softbox, the more, what should I say, confined the width, the angles of this light going out will be. I've tried real narrow softboxes. I have tried big wide ones. I have one softbox that's here that I use all the time, and I don't worry about that anymore. And it is about maybe 2 feet wide, maybe 3 feet high. And I can use it either horizontal if I want to wrap around a little bit, or I can use it vertically if I want a little bit narrower body of light going out to the person I'm photographing.
So one last question. How do you decide who to photograph if you have a choice?
Cowboys was a lot easier. The Cowboys, somebody would come into my gallery, and anybody that came into my gallery that was local, I would ask them, do you know any cowboys? And then I would say something like, best would be elderly cowboys, old cowboys or cowgirls. I'm doing this blind. I'm asking about a possible cowboy out there. So what I want to do is cause this person to think in an area that might get me the best picture possible. For instance, if I have a 90-year-old cowboy to photograph, the chances are the photograph will tell more of that cowboy's life story than if I had a 25-year-old cowboy to photograph. And that's just basic. It comes down to wrinkles and scars and whiskers and like that. So somebody would come in and say, "Oh man, I know this cowboy," and I would go, "How old are they?" First thing I want to do. And after a while, I got to a place where I could interpret these descriptions and come up with a rough idea of whether the person I was told about stood a good chance of making a good photograph. And so then I would call them and introduce myself and see if I could talk them into being photographed. And some I could, and a few I couldn't, but most I could. Surprisingly, the women, cowgirls, older cowgirls that I called, were harder to talk into being photographed because they didn't want their wrinkles to show. So anyway, Indians are a whole different thing. If somebody tells me about a traditional Indian on some reservation, let's say I'm thinking of a couple guys in particular on the Flathead Reservation, and they're elders, and they have been in a number of videos, so I could actually go on the internet and see videos of them. And then what I would have to do is call them up and try to talk them into being photographed. And that's difficult. If you know anything about the history between whites and native people in the United States, this is the last 200, 150 years of history, you will realize that they don't trust whites, and with very good reason. And so when I call them up and try to talk them into being photographed, it's difficult. It's uphill. They are thinking exploitation. What is this white guy trying to pull on me? If I can get past that and make an appointment, generally I find out that they don't keep the appointment. If I happen to have their home phone number and I call them up and I can still talk them into being photographed, generally they'll show up without all of the clothing regalia that we talked about previously. They are running a very, exploitation is a very big word. So choosing my subjects, somewhere in what I just described to you, I actually get to photograph a few traditional Indians. It's an uphill battle. It's difficult. Quite often, they don't have as much traditional breastplates or chokers or feathers, or just traditional Indian stuff as I would like. Usually they'll bring like a vest and a choker, and maybe they'll remember to bring a war bonnet with them. And I just have to make the best of it. I've now been photographing Indians for about 3 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I am now at a place to where I have some good friends. Certainly on the Fort Peck Reservation. About 2 months ago, I was adopted in a very old ceremony, very interesting stuff by a medicine man. I was adopted into the Assiniboine tribe and given an Indian name. Further, I am gradually gaining some pretty good friends especially on the Fort Peck Reservation, because I've been going up there so often to photograph street people. Some of my friends are street people. Last time I was up there, which was only a couple weeks ago, there was a new soup kitchen that opened, and I had dinner there with 5 or 6 or 7 street people that I'm getting to know kind of good. So now, how do I select my subjects? This now has become more complex. I have a Assiniboine guy friend who we have become good enough friends. He is not a street person. He is a traditional native Assiniboine guy. Dances at powwows, very traditional. If I'm painting this picture fairly well, you can see that the next step in how my subjects get selected is fairly complex. And it goes something like this. My friend Don, Rattling Thunder, LaRock, and I work together on this project. He uses this project to get his tribe to try to improve some of the things that are going on the reservation that are difficult. He will go in to a tribal council meeting with photographs of street people in order to talk to the tribal councilman about limiting alcohol on the reservation. So anyway, Don will talk to a few street people. 2 more things about Don. One is he cooks in a soup kitchen to help people in his community. So he knows a lot of the street people coming in. Another thing is that next time it opens up, he's going to run for tribal council. So Don is gradually gaining some respect. Gradually, he is gaining quite a bit of respect on the reservation. So we've been doing this together for about 1.5 years now, and he has come to know what I'm looking for in a street person or in a traditional person. He is very good at that. And so he will ask people if they would go along with being photographed, be they traditional, be they street people. And so I have that going for me, which I am really blessed. I am blessed, thrice blessed in that situation up there. Again, it evolved. Again, I worked my way through this. I put in my time. I did the best that I could and kept at it, persistence, determination. And so now when I'm going up there, I usually have 2, 3, 4, 5 people who will show up at a soup kitchen ready to be photographed. In addition to that, when the people up there know that I'm coming, a lot of the street people will show up anyway. Some because they know me, some because they may get a pack of cigarettes free or something. And so in addition to what Don does, every once in a while I'll find some street person that I think would make a really good photograph. And in that case, I will ask them. And usually they will go along with it. Almost invariably, they will go along with it. So somewhere in there is how, a better way to say it is how my subjects get selected. Some of them don't work out. They're well dressed. They obviously get plenty to eat. This picture has to tell a story, and that picture that I described is not going to tell the story of the desperation and the addiction and all of the just god-awful things that are involved in being a street person. So some of the pictures just don't work. Some of the pictures, I just can't get the person I'm photographing to be that street person who photographs like a street person with good composition and good tonalities and good lighting and all that. So sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of times it doesn't work. But there's my process.
Getting to know your subjects is a big part of what you do in preparing for a photograph.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely starts as far ahead of time as I can cause it to start. In other words, with cowboys, I'd go out there a few days ahead of time and just look at their ranch, talk to them, listen to them, watch how they grab a saddle and lift it, or listen to it's haying time now and we're running into this. I want to get an idea of who they are, what their life is like. With street people, I don't get that 2 or 3 or 4 days ahead because it is a long drive. It's a 7-hour drive one way up to the Fort Peck Reservation. So I don't get that ahead of time thing as much as I did with cowboys, because the cowboys are all central Montana. Indians are spread all over Montana. However, when I have a street person that might make a good photograph, we carry on a dialogue all the way through that photo session. And the dialogue, let's go back to evolving. The dialogue evolves. The photograph evolves. Everything is evolving. The composition is evolving. What they do with their hands is evolving. How close I can verbally lead them. And I tell them I'm going to do this ahead of time. And if they don't agree to it, but they always do, I won't do it. But while we're talking, I am verbally leading them to what you might call the heart of darkness, the heart, the center, the center of despair, the center dark area of being on the streets, being a street person, being addicted. And quite often it leads them to a place of death, deaths close to them that push them into being a street person in the first place. Quite often it leads, especially with ladies, with their children being taken away from them because they're no longer fit to raise them. But anyway, yes, I talk to them, and yes, I consciously lead them towards the heart of the thing, the heart of the photograph, the heart of the final image, the heart of who they are. There's also one more reason for that. There's going to be a book. I'm going to do a book on the street people of the Fort Peck Reservation. And I'm going to write a foreword to that book, and the title will be something like On Being Homeless. And I'm going to write a very real, very accurate, very hard description of exactly what it is like being homeless on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. And when I do that, I'm a white guy. I'm an outsider. I need to really, really, really understand what their life is like in order to do that. I do not want to demean them by doing some puff article on being a street person. I want this thing to be the reality of the thing, said in the fewest words possible, in their own words as much as possible. And so there's another reason why each photo session with each street person, we talk very seriously. And in the process, I find that we actually kind of become close in this process.
Stepping out of your comfort zone once again, huh?
Do I have to go to a reservation to where I'm an unwelcome outsider? Do I have to try to talk a traditional Indian elder into being photographed when he thinks I'm trying to exploit him? I got rid of my comfort zone. It was hard, but I did. So yes, like I said, I don't have a comfort zone anymore, so I don't have to worry about that. I just do the thing.
Well, before we go, we should tell everybody where to find your photographs and your book. Again, just in case they didn't tune in last time.
Okay, let's see. The book, easiest place is Amazon. Best place is to come into my gallery in Livingston, Montana. So the book, The Cowboys of Central Montana, 50 Portraits by Robert Osborn. Amazon, best place to buy it. Well, the easiest place to buy it. Come into my gallery and buy one. My gallery is in Livingston, Montana, 110 South Main Street, brand new gallery, and it is gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. I designed the whole thing, and I've had a gallery in Montana for about 8, 9, 10 years now, something like that. But this one I'm in now is brand new, and it was designed from everything that was done here to be a photography gallery, fine art photography gallery. Website, www.robertosborn.com. You'll get there. You'll find me.
Well, thanks for being on the show again, Bob. It's been great fun as usual.
Thank you, Kirby. I appreciate it very much.
So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Photographing the West, where twice a month we bring you interviews with interesting people. Show notes can be found at www.photographingthewest.net. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to Photographing the West podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and leave us a review. Till next time, here's wishing you safe travels and good light.